Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dotson, and I'm the founder and program coordinator for Highland Park Poetry. Today's program is all about the Poetry Pentathlon. And before I give you a little background and history about the Poetry Pentathlon, I'd like to introduce my special guest, Don Shearn. Don has been a resident of Highland Park since 1981 and a writer since before he can remember. He's been a regular poetry and prose contributor to East on Central. His 2005 one-act play, The Heart of Redness, was produced in 2005 in connection with the Chicago Dramatists. He has written numerous unpublished novels and screenplay. His screenplay, Beijing Driving Academy, made the top 25 list of Slam Dance in 2008, but is still not produced. Don blogs irregularly at donsbasement.com and is working on his new novel, The 5 Books of Krinsky, which he plans to self-publish this year. Well, the reason Don is here is because last year in 2014, Don rocked the North Shore Poetry Pentathlon, which was held in the main gallery at the Art Center, impressing all 3 judges and the audience. And so that's why I wanted to bring Don to talk about his experience as a competitor in the Poetry Pentathlon.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. It's great to compete.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, so now, what did you think about it when you heard about the contest?
Okay, well, my first issue was with the first category, which was sonnet.
Okay.
Because I studied comparative literature at the University of California. So I knew what a sonnet was, and I knew how difficult a sonnet was. Because not only did you have a rhyme scheme, you had a meter, and then you had a problem, and then you had to solve this problem, all sounding relatively good. So I was...
and in only 14 lines.
And in 14 lines. It could be the Petrarchan, the 8-6, or the Elizabethan, the 12-2. A little more challenging because you had to answer the problem in 2 lines. So I went with that one, the 2 lines. And I think we had some email interchange, and you said, why don't you try it? And so I said, okay, all right. So I did. Well,
you've come to many of the open mics in the past, and you've submitted poems, and both in East on Central, as you brought an issue here. So I knew you as a writer, and I knew you as a performer in terms of reading at open mics. So I thought you would be a perfect candidate, shall I say. Well, I guess let me just give a little brief background about the Poetry Pentathlon, which is that, well, first of all, there are many types of poetry events. There's, I guess, very popular, originated in Chicago, is the Poetry Slam. Well, the Poetry Pentathlon is not a slam. It's supposed to be in a poetry slam, the poet is judged by the audience. So it's sometimes can be a bit of a popularity contest. Who's got the biggest posse of friends and fans and followers filling the seats? But this is supposed to really test all the poet's skills, not just in terms of writing, but also in terms of performance. And as this is called the Poetry Pentathlon, I'm going to show the prize, the grand prize for the North Shore's Poetry Pentathlon, which is the chalice, as we so reverently, and it is, like the name suggests, the Poetry Pentathlon has 5 events, and they're supposed to challenge the writer in a variety of ways. As you sounded like you were very challenged when you were called upon to write your sonnet. Was that your first sonnet that you'd ever written?
No, but the first in maybe 30 years.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe we should just kick off with having you read that. Do you
All
mind?
right.
Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
I'll let the audience hear what you...
Yes, this, telling you in advance, it's the 12/2, and it was also in May, and it was around the Kentucky Derby time, so I called it the backstretch. A mare in foal, she births a colt. Bloodline define the breed. He falters in the early years, yet the track he learns to pace. Discovering he has some gifts, some skill, a bit of speed. Well, never in the Derby he competed in the race. Sometimes I'm told he did fall short. Sometimes he found a stride. From afar it may be viewed in losses or in wins. Yet around him there came nourishment, hope it never died. The effort gave him comfort and covered up his sins. Beginning at the starting gate, the end, the finish line, it's the same with every race that's ever run. From afar it all whirs by, the past is left behind. Waking up in morning mist, then darkness claims the sun. As with this aging stallion, now comes his time to roam, standing ready at the backstretch for his final race back home.
All right. Well, you sounds like you nailed it. Sounds good. I guess we should talk about what were the challenges for the 2014 Poetry Pentathlon. There were 5 events. So the first was the sonnet. Then there was the how-to poem. And what would you describe to be a how-to poem?
Well, a how-to poem is like if you're a gardener or a cook or a craftsperson, you write a poem about your experience in that endeavor. Mm-hmm. So that was, I also found challenging because I really don't do anything besides working and writing. And okay. So I didn't want to write about writing.
Yeah, okay.
So
although I suppose you could have.
I could have. I was toying with how to office, because I've officed for many years, but
well, it is, I guess, there is an instructional element that's required of the poem. You're supposed to be imparting something. Now, I suppose you could take it off in a fantastical direction. What wisdom did you end up sharing?
Well, it was more, it was about my weight.
Oh, okay, all right.
Would you like me to,
yes,
to read this?
Yes.
All right.
It's fabulous.
I will do this. Does this poem make me look fat? Elegy for my mother. Age 10, the early years. She took me to Raymond's on Oakton in Skokie to shop for clothes. Boys husky. The horror. 14. On an airplane flying between 8th grade and high school, I asked for and received a second plastic-wrapped sealed plate of United Airlines food. I'm going to play basketball. The stewardess looked down, smiled in an unfriendly way. You mean football. Age 20. Staying up all night, partying, are the euphemism of your choice after a peace march, where Carl Reiner acknowledged that Washington had a larger turnout, but here in San Francisco, we were having more fun. I weighed in at 151 pounds, nearly felt svelte for the first and last time. Age 33. A relative shares. Married life agrees with you. You're fat. 38. I make a joke about the hospital gown. The doctor says it looks stylish and that I'm borderline obese. As it turns out, evenings of margaritas from mixes with bottom shelf Montezuma tequila and 7-layer bean dip have consequences. So began portion control, skipping meals, exercise, and the daily battle that leads to a weekly weigh-in. My mother remained thin and then too thin. From 1930 to 2013, 83 years of watching herself and others finding time to share her observations. Is your daughter still a size 2? As legacies go, Mom, having a son who watches his weight because of you is not endowing a university, but it's not chopped liver or potato pancakes or a Snickers bar.
Wow, well, you took a nice spin on that.
Impounding or expounding the messages of.
Yes.
That was her defining characteristic in life. There were the thin people and everybody else.
Oh, okay. All right.
That was it.
Yeah, that's tough. But no, it was nice. You approached it in a instead of like a list of things that you would steps to do to you actually let the audience or the reader, the audience, the listener figure out sort of the instruction behind it just by sort of the schedule of the memories, you know. That was of the accumulated memories. It was very nice.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
The third event, and this tends to be a common for all of the, well, for many of the poetry pentathlons that I've read about, and that's called the Poetry Potluck. And the benefit of the Poetry Potluck is that the competitor is given the poem written by someone else to perform. And in turn, the competitor gives his or her poem to another performer to perform. So the idea is that what this does is challenge the writer as a performer, the poet as a performer. But you actually also brought the poem that you had, that you gave to someone else to read.
I did.
So, well, when you were strategizing for the competition, what was your thinking in terms of what kind of poem you would bring? I mean,
well,
what kind of challenge were you hoping to make for your?
Well, because the judging was going to be half and half, I couldn't. Now I'll let others decide if what's a totally lame poem, but maybe I've already done them. But I didn't want to do a totally lame poem because that would reflect poorly on me.
Right.
But then I didn't want to do one that was so personal that it would seem odd coming from this other person. Their performance would affect how the poem would be judged.
Right.
So I wanted it. I went for universality.
Okay.
Thinking, you know, it's relatable to poets.
Okay.
Like super obviously relatable.
Well, that was good because then, as you say, the scoring for the Poetry Potluck is that for each poem, like you got half of the score.
Right.
For for your poem that was read, and as well as getting half of the score for the poem that you read by someone else.
Yeah, I think I didn't bring it because I can't remember, but the poem that someone gave to me was written from a women's point of view, and I think I got extra credit for that because I think people thought that was funny for some reason.
Oh, okay.
So I think it worked out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, why don't you read the poem that you gave to someone else?
This is the one. The Mount Rushmore of Poets. Last summer, I purchased 2,000 acres of rugged country and jagged peaks near Keystone, South Dakota. The decision-making took as much time as the blasting, digging, carving, fighting the damn conservationists, bureaucrats, the historians, and the poetic pre-industrial complex. There are really a lot of good poets. But I only hired a crew for the summer. And the thing is, it's in stone. So if you put T.S. Eliot up there, it's like banker, algebra teacher. I started with the bard. Long flowing hair from a lengthening forehead, and his eyes say, "Is there a back end in all this for me?" It is no mean feat to sculpt the ruffled, even frilly collar that Emily Dickinson wears on my mountain. She watches over the observation towers, parking lot, and lodge complex with a look so far beyond disdain, it would take a poet to describe it. So we moved on to Walt Whitman. With his craggy face full of facial hair and printer's ink, Walt gave me a margin of error, My flaws contain multitudes. Finally came Edgar. Dead eyes, evil smirk, the mustache, the cravat, the rhyming. Kids love him. Need a ticket to the tram ride? Omnimax Theater, 10% off at the gift shop? Meet me later, I'll hook you up. It's what poets do.
Well, I think one thing both the judges and the audience really appreciated was that you do have a good sense of humor that is well expressed in your writing, and again, very clever. How did you feel about this poem? How did I don't remember which competitor read this poem. Do you
thought
remember?
it was a lady, and she did a good job. I don't think she nailed that back end line for me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that what I was trying to make the point was, Shakespeare was a real operator and a business person. And I don't know if she got that, but the rest of it she did pretty well.
Oh, great. Cool. And then the fourth event last year was the famous poem, which I think I think I only said that the requirement was that you just had to be be about a famous person, either written from that person's perspective or about events or series of events that shaped who or what she was, what was most intriguing about that person, was that person represent to you, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. So what did you do?
Okay, well, I totally didn't understand what you were asking for. So I wasn't sure if you were to write in the style of a poet.
I see. Okay.
Or about the poet, or your thoughts about the poet. So I just threw it all together.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Let's hear this
And-
thrown all
Okay,
together.
all right. I call this North Shore Community. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Allen Ginsberg, as I drive my 2007 Subaru into the barely paved driveway of a tiny pre-tear-down cottage in a community that cherishes character on its signposts but consumption in its heart. I return from wage-slave provinces of retail to landscaping nightmares of over-budget, underperforming attempts at bringing order to a well-trimmed lawn. What dramatic lighting, enchanted flower beds, garages aspiring to be homes, homes aspiring to be palaces, palaces going into the default of history, torn to bits, its brick and brack sold off as universal pawn. Allen Ginsberg, I saw you at Northwestern, chanting with Tibetan master, as an old graybeard telling us we should screw more, worry less, and try to be joyful as death nibbles on our toes, singing a song on its harmonium, going to market, going home, having roast beef, having none, and crying all the way to oblivion. Allen Ginsberg. You read poem about being mugged in New York in 1974, chanting Om Ha at your brown-skinned attackers as they dragged you into abandoned store looking for money in battered wallet. Oh Ah They left you dazed but unhurt in your shoulder bag with $10,000 worth of poems. Oh Ha $48,000 today in capitalist manipulated, fraudulent, bankrupt currency. Allen Ginsberg, I saw you in the bathroom, but didn't know what to say. You wrote Howl. You're Carlo Marx in On the Road. You testified at Chicago 7 trial reciting Moloch, the vast stone of war, Moloch, the stone government, Moloch, whose ear is a smoking tomb, Moloch, whose blood is running money. If you can hear me in spiritual ether that we know should exist, even if it doesn't, if you can hear me with your soul because in enlightenment the goddamn monks will cut off your ears just to make their points, if you can hear me in transcendence that you sought through LSD, Buddhism, Bhakti Vedanta, Hare Krishna, and half the men in the first edition of New American Poetry in the bathroom, Allen Ginsberg, I wanted to say, I'm a big fan. Thank you.
I love that. As I recall it, the house was, the audience was like,
it was huge.
It was huge. The reaction was great.
Yeah.
What I love about that, I just noticed it just now, is that you, I love that you kind of incorporated the three little pigs into this little piggy, this little piggy. That's the thing. You incorporated this little piggy into that somehow. That was fabulous. Wow, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Very well done. I guess I should. My experience with the Poetry Pentathlon goes back to 2013. Because in 2013, I published my book, my debut, Clever Gretel, and I was looking for venues in Chicago to hopefully sell my book. And I had stumbled upon a reading of this group called Waiting for the Bus in Chicago, and they did regular open mics, but then they also did this thing called the Poetry Pentathlon. And so I signed up to be a competitor, and the other sort of challenge that's typically in all of these poetry pentathlons is an on-the-spot prompt. So this is where you are given, you don't know what you're going to write about. The other four poems you're prepared for, but the last poem you don't know, because it's literally an on-the-spot prompt. You arrive at the arena, as it were, and the guy tells you this is what the poem is that the prompt is that you need to write. And so while the competition is going on, you're sitting there, scribbling. I mean, was it like that for you? Or
absolutely. No, it was very challenging.
Okay.
In fact, it was so challenging I didn't bring it. Because I didn't even
put. Did you burn the poem?
I did not. I didn't burn the poem. I felt it. Well, I'll just go back to my experience. It was very close, and I was concerned that one was going to bring me down. But what was your experience with your prompt?
Well, I was terrified because the prompt was. See, I don't, and my memory is terrible. I don't even remember what was the prompt I gave last year, which is embarrassing. But the prompt that I got in 2013 in Chicago was The Secret Life of Three. And everybody else picked the number 3, like it was like they were some sort of metaphysical, exploration about the number 3. But when I was struggling, I mean, I thought, well, maybe it's something about famous 3 people, and so then I tried to think of famous 3 people. So this is what I came up with, My Secret Life of 3. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the most famous family. Even after reading the Bible, do we really know them? What the Bible doesn't discuss are Jesus's teen years. Hidden behind closed doors and shuttered windows, they argue. They argue about Joseph's struggling carpentry business. They argue about the texture of Mary's hummus. They argue about how long Jesus takes in the shower. Their voices low, they hiss and snarl, they spit and snap so the neighbors won't hear the bitter exchange. The next day, the mask slips on, the beatific smiles and halos firmly in place. So that was my poem. Happily, I won. I won that year, so it was nice because then they did give me an opportunity as my prize to actually be the guest poet for one of their open mic events. And while I didn't sell many books at their open mic event, I was still honored to go and read. But more importantly, I was so enthralled by the whole notion of the Poetry Pentathlon. I thought, gosh, we really have to do that up in Highland Park. And I did approach the Waiting for the Bus crew and say, hey, would you come to Highland Park and do it? And they were like, well, no, we kind of do our own thing. But you know what? We'd be happy if you want to take this model and make it your own and just give us credit for it. So I always mention that Chicago's Waiting for the Bus created this fabulous, fun evening. And here's the quote that the creator did. Sometimes a bit of competition can liven up a poetry reading or series or energize the atmosphere of a poetry event. So saith David Hargarten, also known as Buddha 309 for Waiting for the Bus, because he says it's a dynamic competition of testing all the poet's skills. Well, you were a competitor in 2014 and the champ.
Yes.
You're the reigning champ. So now this year, what are you going to do?
Well, I debated long and hard, and I decided that I did not want to give up my championship, so I volunteered to be a judge.
Fabulous. Okay. That's wonderful. This year's 5 competitions are the Pantoum, which is the formal challenge. Are you, have you
I did write one.
Oh, okay. So you are familiar with the form.
Well, I wrote one after you sent that thing. It's not, you can describe the form.
Well, it's, I have to check my notes. It originated in Malaysia. It's a 15th century, originated as a folk poem, typically made up of 2 rhyming couplets that are recited or sung. As it was converted, Western writers adapted the form, and so the importance of rhyming and brevity diminished. The modern Pantoum is a poem of any length, composed of 4-line stanzas in which the 2nd and 4th lines of each stanza serve as the 1st and 3rd lines of the next stanza. So you're repeating lines and kind of taking them in and out of order. It sounds dreadful, but the results can be
Well, what's nice about it is that you don't have to write as many lines.
That's true.
Because you can repeat them.
That's right.
With impunity.
Okay, so that was number 1. Number 2 is the epistle or letter poem. So that should be nice. Then we have our poetry potluck again. The next challenge, number 4, is the fairy tale poem. And then, of course, we've got the on-the-spot prompt, which I think I probably should write it down this year in my date book so that I don't completely forget. And true confessions, last year I did basically have my husband came up with it. Maybe that's why I don't remember.
I remember it was very challenging.
Okay. And then, so our event is going to be held on Friday, May 15th. The location is still to be determined. We're thinking it's going to be at the shed.
Oh, cool.
But information will be posted on our website. So hopefully people will come out and check out the competition. And then if you were so excited about our Poetry Pentathlon, Chicago's Waiting for the Bus have already announced their competition will be held September 19th at the Bookseller, which is a bookstore on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago. And their challenges are the Sestina, the Rant, poem for multiple voices, which ought to be really hard. And then instead of a poetry potluck, they're doing a new thing called Rescue and Revise a Bad Poem. They've found, apparently there's a website out there called badpoetry.com, and then apparently you're supposed, the competitors are supposed to go to that website, pick a bad poem, or maybe a poem will be picked for them, and then you try to rescue this poem with revision and editing while still maintaining something of the original voice, I suppose. I don't know. It should be fun and exciting. So anyway, we hope that we get folks to join us for that. But now that you're not writing so much poetry, you're really focusing all your attention on your book.
Yes, yes.
Do you have a brief plug for the 5 books?
I do. The 5 books of Krinsky. It's in my folder. It's called Don's Obsession because I've been working on it since at least the 90s. And each chapter of the book begins with a verse of the Bible, or the Jewish Bible. And then comes a story of this man, this middle-aged man who's a...
Krinsky?
It's Krinsky. That's correct.
Okay.
Krinsky. Marriage is breaking up. He kind of